Over 1 million satellites have been filed for a sky with no borders. This is the file on who controls it. In February of 2022, as Russian columns crossed into Ukraine, the country's networks began to fail. Within days, satellite terminals were pouring across the border, eventually tens of thousands of them, paid for by allied governments. A nation at war rebuilt its nervous system in the sky, and then it learned who the sky belonged to. One private company operated the constellation. One individual controlled the company. No treaty bound him. No parliament confirmed him. No voter could remove him. When his judgment differed from a government's, his judgment held. Over the sky, at least, it was his call. This file is about what happened when every capital on Earth understood that at the same time. Above the atmosphere, there are no borders, no territorial waters, no straits to close. And yet the most consequential scramble for territory this decade is happening there. Under rules written for a different age, on a first-come, first-served basis, start with what the network actually became. By 2026, Ukraine's government counted more than 50,000 Starlink terminals delivered through official channels, and analysts estimate over 200,000 operating in the country in total. They carry artillery coordination, drone video, hospital links, power grid repair crews, and the ordinary internet of a country whose ground infrastructure keeps getting bombed. Military planners had spent decades assuming satellite communications meant a handful of big, distant, vulnerable spacecraft. A mesh of thousands of small satellites in low orbit turned out to be something else entirely. Infrastructure that is genuinely hard to kill. Here is the mechanism that makes it hard to kill. A traditional communications satellite sits in one high spot, take it out, or jam it, and the service dies. A low-orbit constellation is a swarm, thousands of satellites, each crossing the sky in minutes, each replaceable. The network routing around losses automatically. The terminal on the ground is a flat dish the size of a pizza box that talks to whatever passes overhead. Jam one path, and it finds another. Destroy one satellite, and 30 more are coming over the horizon. The resilience isn't a feature of any single machine. It's a property of the geometry. Which brings us to the episode everyone half remembers. In 2023, reports described Ukrainian sea drones closing on the Russian fleet near Crimea and losing their link mid-attack, as if a kill switch had been thrown. The accurate version, later corrected by the biographer who first told it, is quieter and stranger. Coverage near Crimea was already off. It had never been enabled there. Ukraine asked for it to be switched on for the operation, and one man declined, reasoning that saying yes would make his company a participant in an act of war. Read it either way. There was no dramatic hand on a switch. There didn't need to be. The default state of the map was the decision. Governments have leaned on private industry in wartime forever. Railroads, shipyards, oil majors. But a railroad baron could be nationalized, regulated, sued, drafted. The switch for a battlefield network in orbit sits outside every one of those tools. It answers to no procurement office and no War Powers Act. Every capital watched the same episode and filed the same memo. The connectivity of a nation at war can hinge on the private judgment of a single individual. That is a genuinely new kind of power, and nations do not like being on the wrong end of it, and the switch kept mattering in both directions. In 2025, reporting described access to the network surfacing as leverage inside negotiations between Washington and Kyiv, dependence as a bargaining chip between governments. Then, in February 2026, the switch flipped the other way. Terminals that Russian forces had captured and pressed into service on the front line were cut off, at Ukraine's request. By May, the Pentagon was telling reporters Ukraine had retaken ground where Russian units suddenly went dark. The lesson compounds. Whoever holds the switch shapes the battlefield, and everyone else plans around that fact. So if you are a state, any state, you draw one conclusion: never be locked out of the sky, which raises the question this file is actually about. How exactly do you claim a piece of a place that has no borders? The answer runs through a 160-year-old UN agency in Geneva, the International Telecommunication Union. Orbits and radial frequencies are coordinated there, and the operating principle is brutally simple. First come, first served. You file paperwork describing a constellation, the orbits you'll use, the frequencies you'll transmit on. If you file first, you have priority. Everyone who files later must prove they won't interfere with you. They design around your claim. The filing costs thousands of dollars. The satellites it describes would cost billions, and nothing in the rules requires you to ever build them. The gap between those two numbers is the entire game. So look at who is racing. SpaceX has roughly 10,700 Starlink satellites in orbit, nearly everything flying today, with authorization for tens of thousands more. Amazon's constellation, renamed Leo, has a few hundred up of a planned 3,200, and it fell far enough behind schedule that this January it asked regulators for more time. It got a conditional waiver instead, and every satellite it launches late now forfeits its original spectrum priority. China is racing hardest with two state-backed constellations, Guowang, around 13,000 planned, and Qianfan, around 15,000, already past 200 satellites in orbit. A deliberate sovereign alternative to an American network it refuses to depend on. And Europe is spending billions on its own secure system, IRIS², 282 satellites that even its own militaries admit won't all be flying by 2030. Picture low Earth orbit as a set of nested lanes. Altitude shells, each a few hundred kilometers up, each able to hold only so many satellites before collision risk and radio interference make it unusable. The inner lanes are filling now. One operator's swarm flying today. 3 more swarms under construction around it. And outside them, a third ring is growing faster than all of the others combined. A ring of satellites that exist only on paper. Now the numbers that sound made up. In 2021, Rwanda, which had launched exactly one small satellite, filed at the ITU for 327,320 satellites. In the last week of December 2025, Chinese entities filed for roughly 203,000 more, 14 constellations worth of paperwork in 7 days, most of it from a single institute. Add every filing on the books, and more than 1 million satellites have been proposed. Perhaps 50 times what will plausibly fly. Most of these will never launch. That was never the point. The point is to hold the paper, to reserve the orbits and the airwaves now, and decide later what they're worth or who will pay for them. The system does have an immune response. Rules adopted in 2019 say a filed constellation must start launching within 7 years, orbit 10% of it within 2 more, half within 5, and all of it within 7, or the filing shrinks to what you actually flew. Use it or lose it. But the clock starts late, the milestones are years apart, and a claim can sit on the books for the better part of a decade doing its work. Deterring rivals, reserving spectrum without a single launch. In a first-come, first-served system, even a temporary flag changes where everyone else can stand. Every file in this series is about geography deciding things. A strait, a river, a ridge of rare earth. This one is about the opposite. A place with no geography at all, no borders, no choke points, no coastlines, being carved into territory anyway by filing dates and frequency tables. The first scramble for land happened on maps. This one is happening in spreadsheets in Geneva. The instinct is the same. 3 ways this file ends. 1. The paper system holds. Milestones cull the ghost fleets, and orbit stays crowded but governed. 2. The claims turn real. Launch costs keep falling, and the million-satellite sky actually arrives, with everything that means for collision risk and the night itself. 3. The rules break. A first mover's dominance, or one collision cascade, forces the first real treaty for low Earth orbit. The sky has no borders. We are drawing them anyway.